Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. The Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. Use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee, and right now you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Go to Gemini.com/card to learn more. Terms apply. See the link in the description for more information regarding rates and fees.
A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we've got one of our good buddies aboard, Justin Perri. He does an incredible job over at Chalk Volley Bets. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. We're going to be chatting with him just about some of the preseason preparation that he is doing, how to take a look at, and I air quotes here, glue guys in college basketball as well. Just how shot quality has been changing college basketball, the way that he utilizes it with regards to his own handicap, some of the things that he takes a look at towards the beginning part of the season, if it is easier or harder to be able to handicap some of these teams towards the beginning part of the season as well. Additionally, we're going to be chatting with him about just overall chemistry, some of these guys coming back, ways to take a look at transfers, and I always have to ask him about this because Chalk Volley Bets always does a great job of being able to utilize a data subset, how he takes a look at freshmen, because with not having as many COVID fifth years anymore, a lot of those guys aging out, we are going to be seeing more freshmen, and how Justin is going to be quantifying that and how he's going to be preparing for that. So we've got ourselves an amazing podcast. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, the me does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever. With EdgeBoost, 100% of gambling transactions do get approved. And when you go to EdgeBoost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That's going to get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat it up with our good friend Justin, as he does a great job over at Chalk Volley Bets. I know that he does great work over at Hoops HQ as well. That is the website of Seth Davis. He's been doing some work there. For those of you that are baseball fans, he was contributing over at Pitcher List as well. So he's a man of very, very many talents, and you are able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Justin Perri, the number 8 altogether, and Perri is spelled P-E-R-R-I on that last name. And Justin, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, always so much fun to join you on the pod. Excited to chat a little college hoops. We are so close to the start of the season. I can't wait.
I can't wait either. And Justin, what sort of things are you doing this offseason that might be a little bit different than past off seasons to get set for this season? Because we saw a record amount of transfers. We've seen just some shocking coaching news here in the month of September as well. And it just feels like it's been a little bit more of a strange offseason than what we've seen in the past.
It's been pretty crazy. I mean, we have so many moves going on. I think we're finally seeing the culture of college basketball, both the coaches and the players, really settle into the fluidity of the transfer portal, and it's borderline free agency, right? These players can go where they want, when they want. Coaches can buy out of their own contracts. They can leave without, filling out their final years. There's, coaches getting canned 2 months before the season starts for a plethora of reasons. There's just, and then players flying around like crazy. It's a little nuts.
Yep, it certainly has been. And with regards to just what we've all been able to get this offseason, it has been really interesting with regards to coaching moves, but I want to get your thoughts on some individual players that you think might be impact guys, because I do think that that's such an interesting aspect of things. I know that some of our good friends like Evan Miyakawa are starting to put out their rankings in terms of most impactful guys to their teams, and just how do you take a look at things, because I know that you do a great job of this over at Chalk Volley Bets, as do I as well. A guy that scores 15 points per game on, say, Alabama might be a little bit different than 15 points per game on, say, Virginia back when they were in the Tony Bennett style. And I always do think that it is interesting to quantify just how meaningful a player is to their team.
It's definitely different, for sure. You want to take into account, I think, PER, like efficiency numbers, not just necessarily raw scoring data when you're trying to take a real look at these players, because depending on the systems, depending on the leagues, depending on the opponent, 15 points is very different anywhere you go, really. I mean, obviously, there's some similarities and some teams do play kind of that same speed or anything. But if you're saying, oh, this guy's a 20-point scorer, and then you don't really tell me anything else, like I care a lot more about rates per possession is really, I think, the easiest way to look at things, and then trying to, normalize by actual number of possessions per team.
Yep, and I do think that that is so important to be taking a look at, and I do think that that's interesting to always dive in on as well. And I do think that there are a few guys out there that they just, with the way that they have the ball in their hands so much, like a Braden Smith over at Purdue is an obvious example of a guy that's going to be so impactful. I think that those are guys that you always want to focus on, but are there a few guys that might be a little bit under the radar that you feel like are a bit more meaningful to their team than what maybe some people are giving them credit for?
Yeah, I mean, we use that term glue guy. I think there's energy guys. There's players who come in, especially with how the stats in today's world are oriented, where sometimes they don't paint the full picture. I think a really good way to take a look at this stuff when you're not super sure just necessarily of the impact, or you don't think that maybe the typical box score stats are telling the full picture, is to go look at on-off splits for the team. Like how truly just what happens when this player is on the court versus what happens when they're off the court. And sometimes you might not necessarily see that specific player scoring or assisting or blocking, but, on-ball defense, pressure rates, all these types of things that impact the game, that create easy buckets through good defense, that can be seen through team level performance. Because at the end of the day, it is a team sport. It is not an individual sport. We sometimes get very caught up looking at a player-to-player statistics. But yeah, I think one of the most powerful tools for understanding how good a component is to truly look at the whole when that component is involved.
Yep, I think that that is so important as well. And I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how these guys all are able to fit together, as Justin Perri does such great work over at Chalk Quality Bets. Jonesby right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And is that maybe a little bit more recent to take a look at teams with a bit more experience coming back and just returning minutes from a season ago? Because I do agree with you. I do think that glue guys are oftentimes, shall we say, a little bit harder to quantify. I think that these are guys that make a bigger impact than maybe what the box score and the stat sheet says. And I think that these teams with a lot of transfers, sometimes they get out of the gates a little bit cold, and just being able to have that guy that returns that maybe was averaging 5 or 6 points per game last season, maybe wasn't lighting it up from three, maybe wasn't grabbing a billion rebounds or anything like that, but was able to play good minutes out there on the floor, is something to really take a look at in these first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the first few weeks are always so interesting, right? Because you have that combination of nobody really knowing what you're going to get from the teams. And that includes, the coaches. So the other side of that is that things are changing, right? Like there's going to be adjustments. The way a rotation looks in the first week is very different from the way it's going to look in the fourth week. I mean, then the way that it looks right before you go into conference play, when a coach is like, all right, this is going to be my conference play lineup. This might be a few different shifts. I might go a little bit bigger when I have to play in non-con. If when we get to the tournament, trying to figure out what that lineup's going to look like when they play their quad one road games in non-con. Like, again, you have to sort of get the give and take there, and also how a team responds to those things, right? And when you suffer a big loss and it feels like you didn't play any defense, does a team go back to practice and start ramping up defensive intensity? Do they change their identity a little bit to feel like, all right, we can't just be offensively focused. We need to actually try to incorporate maybe a little bit more of a zone or a press or something to throw opponents off, or play a little bit more drop coverage compared to really exhibiting that on-ball pressure. So I think, the first few weeks are really a beautiful microcosm of the chaos of college basketball. And then, you really settle into a little bit of normalcy when you get into the conference schedule, because teams just don't want to be dealing with trying to figure it out. They've usually settled on their hypothetical best roster and they sort of let it play. I mean, I think you would agree, like large changes in rotations in the middle of February are pretty rare, unless, of course, injury.
Yep, and I think that that is so important to be diving in on, and I think that it is so interesting to be having so many teams that did go into the transfer portal. As we know, 2,500 guys entered this offseason, and just what are some of the characteristics that you look at for teams that did go heavy in the transfer portal, in terms of teams that maybe you might want to back a little bit more versus teams that you want to fade a little bit more? Because I do feel like the volatility with these teams has become greater than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are very excited about to watch is how Ben McCollum's going to do over at Iowa. I think maybe one of the most exciting coaching changes in terms of what happened, and the Hawkeyes portal class is definitely one of the best in the nation, and I think they will be vying for that Big Ten title immediately. So that's one I'm very excited about. I think VCU getting Phil Martelli Jr. from Bryant, who is always a fun team at the mid-major level, is going to be, just a little bit of a bigger mid-major now. But VCU is always such a formidable program, and I think they have that name brand to bring in some good transfer talent, recruit talent, and now you bring in a coach in Martelli who's replacing Mike Rhodes, who's going to Penn State. It's going to be fun. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that program does. Then, of course, some of the more bluer bloods. Of course, you have Texas going with Sean Miller. You have Indiana going with Darian DeVries. It's going to be interesting. I think this is going to be a great season.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that you mentioned Indiana with Darian DeVries, and I want to talk a little bit more about the Big Ten on the flip side, because there were a lot of coaching changes that were made in the Big Ten. I do think that they're all going to be very rock solid, and it's going to be interesting to see the style of play that we get there. I know that Justin always does a great job with his insights, and one of the things that he does a really good job of is being able to quantify so much when data is available. How does he take a look at things when things aren't available for freshmen, though? We're going to be diving in on that topic and so much more on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. Here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by Justin Perri. He does such great work over at Chocolate Bets. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Justin Perri. That last name is spelled Perri, the number 8 altogether. And Justin, we left off talking a little bit about some of these teams that are in a little bit of transition. You brought up Indiana with Darian DeVries coming in, and that was a really good stopping place because I do want to dive in a little bit more on this intriguing Big Ten. Trying to gauge Iowa, because you have to completely throw away those numbers from 8 seasons ago, because Iowa under Fran McCaffrey versus under Ben McCollum, that's going to be a completely different team. I thought Minnesota did a nice job in terms of going out there and getting a guy, Nico Medved, that has had a lot of success in the past as well, and I think that entire conference is going to be one that is going to be interesting to gauge, and I think that the margins are going to be very thin all throughout the Big Ten, and Maryland, what they're going to be able to do under Buzz Williams, I think is of intrigue as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's going to be, I think, a little bit of a stability type of injection, if you will, right? I mean, Kevin Willard going to Villanova, a little bit of drama there. There's some chaos to how Buzz Williams plays for sure. But I think the Terps have one of the more athletic rosters in the conference. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that type of high flying play goes in this conference, and that's kind of the way it seems to be going. It's getting closer and closer to, I think, what professional ball looks like. That is really the way the game's trending. Love it or hate it, these teams are playing more and more like what you see in the NBA. It is all just a big copycat system. I think you're going to see a lot of teams trying to emulate what Oklahoma City Thunder did last year in their defensive schemes, and that's what won championships. That's kind of the best way to play ball right now, and we'll clearly see a lot of shot quality beloved, rim and three rates, and how that sort of interacts with teams and their defensive constructions. And when you sort of allow a team to get to the rim with a type of drop coverage or something like that, it really isn't going to work anymore. You're really going to need a game-breaking center in order to allow those types of looks to really, I think, alter shots at the rim. And I don't know that you have too many in the game, honestly. I mean, honestly, 2 of them might be at Michigan. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting one. And of course, the athleticism and the fun of college basketball should be back at a peak. We're definitely seeing a little bit of the filtration out from the 2020, 2021 seasons with extra years. And you're going to see a little bit more presence of freshmen this year, definitely more presence from sophomores. So that youthfulness, I think, makes the game more fun. You definitely get a little bit more of a feature of ball movement, of smart shots. So it's exciting. I mean, I can't wait. I can't believe we're only like 3.5 weeks away.
Yeah, exactly. Man, we are getting so close to college basketball, less than 3.5 weeks away at the time of this podcast dropping, as well as Justin Perri does such great work over at Chocolate Bets. is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups. And I do think that you bring up something so good in the fact that these freshmen, we're going to be seeing much more of them this year because the COVID fifth year, most of those guys are gone. You might have had one or two guys that were injured that they still have a little bit of eligibility remaining, like Chad Baker-Mazaro. How he's still playing college basketball, I have no idea, but Chad Baker-Mazaro is still playing college basketball, so yay, verily there. But that said, how do you go about gauging freshmen? This is a question that I've asked you in the past, but I always get fascinated by it because I think that that's one of the hardest things to do, to be able to gauge guys in which we just have no tape and we have no, shall we say, stats on them at the college level.
I'm going to give the cop-out answer. It is unfortunately one of the few drawbacks to my personal strategy in college basketball, and that is really, using tape, using what we see in those first couple of games. And honestly, I think what sets apart some of the data that I use at Shot Quality is that we are really able to pounce quickly and get it right at a high clip. So I usually like to see how it goes. I will be a little bit reserved in terms of betting on teams or even, taking futures on teams in those first couple of days, because you definitely want to see like who is able to actually develop good looks. I think the wild card, the freshmen, the wild card of new coaches and new schemes, like they all require a bit of a bump to uncertainty factors that we use and that I use and all this type of stuff to sort of give the data and the projections a little bit of extra give and, maybe a little bit more openness so that when you start to collect this data, it is able to learn with a greater like a breadth of results, right? Like some teams, you're going to come in, you're going to know who all these guys are, you're going to see what the roster looks like, you're going to know what the bench is going to look like. They've all played, you know what they're really going to be. Maybe there's like, all right, how do they work together in the chemistry? And so that range is a lot smaller, right? But some of these teams, I think the best thing you can do is leave your mind open. And in my mind is locked somewhere in an Excel file in an R sheet, but it's definitely something you want to give yourself a little bit of leeway on. And maybe I know a lot of people go gung ho that first day, that first couple days. I think, the real sweet spot is once you get into that second, third week, into that fifth, sixth week. And that's kind of, I think, where you really want to stake your claim. Once you get into conference season, everybody has a good idea. You've seen about 8, 10 games already in the year, and you're not really going to beat anyone to the ball anymore. But like, you can try to do it in the first 2 games. You really have an idea of who's going to be great, and you've watched high school tape, and you have an idea of what these coaches are going to use these players like. But in my opinion, you definitely want to give it at least 3 games to really kind of hone in on where these freshmen are going to be. I think trying to say that you know what's going to go on in these games before anyone sees what's happening is definitely a little bit of a fool's errand.
Yep, I think that is so greatly said by you, and it is a big reason why I've been making bigger and bigger adjustments from my, shall we say, priors than I really have ever before, like year in and year out. I do have to make more dramatic shifts on these teams. And have you found yourself doing that a little bit more as well? Because I do think that it's a little bit harder to be able to gauge these teams. And I would much rather be making a shift nice and early and not being just in a sinking position rather than having faith in something that where it just feels like it could be a little bit flimsy with regards to preseason evaluations because it feels like there's more unknowns than ever before.
Oh, there's so many. It's absolutely insane. I think that you got to give yourself a little bit of that breathing room, right? And I believe it was 2 seasons ago, I was talking with Eric Haslam of Haslametrics and, talking about this sort of uncertainty, I guess, factor and how he uses it and how he builds in some of his stuff early in the year. And I kind of stole his ideas, which I think is totally reasonable as long as you're honest about it, and tried to honestly build out a little bit of a better system for us at Shot Quality, work with our data scientists to make our priors a little bit, a little bit more open, to create like almost like a little bit of a learning mechanism. So yeah, I think you just got to go in with that open mindset, see how everything unfolds, not be afraid to get it wrong. But as long as you're able to determine how wrong you are quickly, there's no problem with being a little incorrect, right? I mean, you hope that your incorrectness balances with your correctness early on. And if anything, even if it doesn't, you go and you get back into the race by correcting quickly and properly and finding the true values these teams have, that these players have faster than anybody else. That's really the game, because at the end of the day, everyone's going to get there. It's just who gets there before, in this case, the market, the books, whatever you want to say. Who knows where everyone's betting these days, all these prediction markets, but you want to just get there first. It's really speed. Everyone's going to get stuff wrong. Everyone's going to be a little off the mark, but everyone also gets to the mark at a pretty similar time, 8 to 10 games. But what can you do in that 5 to 8 game rate there and try to be correct before everyone else lands in that, slimmer target range where over the long term you can't beat the VIG. You likely just, go 52%, and it doesn't really cut it. You need to try to get that 55, 57% early on and be confident and hammer it home when you know that you're more correct before everybody else.
Yep, and I think that is just so important to be realizing as well, because there are 365 Division I teams this year. I don't think anyone is going to be able to get a proper evaluation of all 365, and whoever does, I would like to shake their hand, and they're going to be a very, very rich person, but we're always made richer by you joining this podcast. Justin, I know that you're doing tremendous work getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. I know that you've been doing a great job just over at Shot Quality Bets with regards to like the NBA playoffs, WNBA playoffs. You've done some baseball work over at Pitcher List. You're a man of very, very many talents, so let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm really proud of the work we've done over at Shot Quality and Shot Quality Bets. It is going to be my 4th full season working with the company, and I couldn't be more happy. You can follow everything we're doing over at Shot Quality Bets on Twitter, over on YouTube. We're going to be firing up the content machine very soon. I'm going to be leading most of the content marketing, if not all of it, for the betting side this year. There's just so much fun stuff under the hood at Shot Quality that we've developed out. It's going to be another big year of really setting ourselves apart through our live betting technology. Of course, what we do with post-game scores will always be great for beating the spread or a total on a specific game. But honestly, Greg, at this point, if you're not using a Shot Quality-esque model to really quantify this stuff, you're behind the ball. This is not 2021 anymore, where nobody knows what shot quality is. No one understands expected points in sports. They're very, very common now. And so what we're really turning our focus to is attacking, halftime spreads and mid-game points props and all these types of things, where we have a new proprietary model that's been doing great and that can continue to beat the odds and honestly, bring a little bit of fun. There's nothing more entertaining than betting on Chicago State at the half when they're down by 25 and they cover a plus 32.5 by 7. It's a great time. So we'll be doing that on our live show, Shot Quality Live Betcast, multiple times a week, and hopefully bring some other great content to you guys across all of our platforms. Of course, again, all of them the same handle, Shot Quality Bets. Really easy. And Greg, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great season, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Oh, it is going to be an amazing season, and it is always great to be able to get Justin aboard. He does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and every single time he joins me, his insight is always second to none. So big thanks to Justin for joining me right here on Cuts Cuts Soup, style part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cuts Cuts Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. We're getting you guys set for what is going to be an amazing college basketball season. We've got one conference preview remaining, the Big Ten. We'll probably be doing that in the next week or so. And then once the games get started in 3 weeks, you're getting picks and analysis on every single game, every single day between 2 Division I teams. I don't do the games involving non-Division I teams because most books do not list those up, so you're not able to make money there. But if you're able to make money on the game, I will be giving you guys picks, analysis, and breakdown. So I appreciate you guys tuning in today, and I'll be back to you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Did you know your credit card points and miles can lose value to inflation? Credit card companies often reduce the redemption value of your points and miles. Now, imagine a credit card with rewards that can grow in value. With the Gemini credit card, you can earn Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos instantly with no annual fee. Every swipe at the store or gas pump earns you instant rewards deposited straight to your account. Plus, sign up now for a $200 Bitcoin bonus to kickstart your rewards. Visit Gemini.com/card today. Check out the link in the description for more information on rates and fees. Again, if you're looking to invest in Bitcoin but don't know where to start, the Gemini credit card makes it easy.